Just a Job is the podcast for the modern woman to redefine what success looks like. We highlight real women and their real stories. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Just a Job with Ellen and Sarah. On today's agenda, we've got our weekly stand-up before we go into an interview with Spark Mamas, with Amber and Chelsea. They're fabulous, and I'm very excited to hear and have everyone see and listen to their experiences. So, Sarah, how's it going?
It's good. I'm feeling a little lighter over here, you could say.
Let's just yell
I'm
if
in
it
my
in the
mom
room.
haircut phase.
No.
Yeah.
It is stylish. It is short. It is bobalicious.
Fresh.
Yeah. Everyone
Yeah,
go
I've been telling
compliment
Ellen
Sarah on
that
her
I've been
haircut,
wanting to-
please.
Thank you, Ellen. It's very kind. I've been wanting to cut my hair for a while, so it's due. But all good over here. Otherwise, I have a few items to run through. If I go ahead and hop into it. Question mark.
Why don't you go ahead, kick it
Just
off.
gonna do it.
Jump on in.
Kick it off. All right, I have two things, one work related, one life/work related. So, as everyone is aware, Ellen and I are contractors, and something that we didn't realize that would happen with being a contractor is that you don't often get invited to things as far as like office culture. You're kind of deemed an outsider, which as two, like 2 wing 3s, 3 wing 2, we love to be around people. We're very much people, and obviously we have a podcast, so we could literally just gab all day. And I didn't realize that this would be an issue for me, but not being invited makes me feel like a little kid. And so I made sure that this week when I could, I inserted myself and I became part of the conversation. And I did a little team lunch outing, which I don't know, I feel like a little kid. I'm like, they invited me. But
you were chosen
you
for the
are
team.
A contractor. I know that's actually what it feels like. I was like, oh, I wasn't chosen. But you know what? That's my advice, is that if you're not invited, maybe make your own club or do other things so that you can be a part of the group. So that's my first one. And also, it's okay to cry in the bathroom if you're not involved. Second, there is a podcast called Life Kit by NPR, and it's just little like snackable 20 to 30 minute episodes that talk about anything, just like anything life related. And there's usually some kind of guidance with it. And there was a podcast episode titled Why We Become Bored with Our Lives and How to Find Joy Again. And this was like 2 weeks ago, I think, that I listened to it, and I sent it to Michael at like 8 a.m. and he was like, whoa, that's kind of heavy for this time. I was like, well, listen to it. And basically it was saying that if you ever get in a routine for so long, you basically like habituate and you just kind of continue to like roll through it, and basically the only way out of it and to find joy is change. Which if you're kind of resistant to change, this episode was basically saying like longevity and happiness require change. It can be small, like maybe taking a different route to work or trying a new pen, I don't know, a new notebook or coffee order, or like big. And I don't know, just after listening to that episode, it wasn't anything that was super, oh my God, I've never heard this before. But sometimes, when listening to podcasts, you're like, wow, that was good. I'm going to take that advice. So, those are my two things. Ellen,
those are good takeaways.
You said you had a couple.
I love that.
And we can include
insert yourself and make plans, but also be comfortable with change at the same time. Love that. You are breaking the fourth wall and sharing a podcast, and then also recording a podcast while also sharing your advice. So how's that for a little like mind fuck there? Gorgeous.
Mind.
Okay. I have notes, everyone. So as I unlock my notes app on my phone,
always,
I always try to like think of things throughout the work week and be like, okay, I have to tell the story on the podcast, or like an experience or something that people tell me that I'm like, I have to share. And one of those topics is the aspect of working on the weekends and like work-life balance. And I had a little girlies trip last weekend in Coronado, and it was absolutely fabulous. And we got on this topic of seeing our managers, bosses, supervisors, and their level of dedication to work and how they choose to work on the weekends sometimes and or work on vacation. And it was interesting because most of us were just around the 30 age mark. And the supervisors that we were referencing were 5 to 10 years older than us, maybe. And I thought it was so interesting that the age difference between that relationship with work and how most of the people our age were like, no, there is quite literally nothing that would inspire me or make me want to do work on the weekends outside of my normal like working hours. Whereas they see their supervisors just grind and have to work on the weekends. And I experienced that literally last week, putting a report together, working with my boss. My boss's boss reviewed it and was like, we need to fix this for Monday. And she was like, oh, I'll work on it during the weekend. And I'm like, huh? I'm sure you've got the rest of the day, Friday, you've got Monday morning. Like, I don't know. I genuinely don't think there is any job, like corporate job, I would ever feel comfortable doing and working on the weekends. And I think it's the generational thing is so strange because most people I know of that are older will do that. And people our age and younger are like, absolutely not. Like, I'm showing up for my allotted times and that's it. I thought it was such an interesting concept of the balance between the two, right?
Yeah. Not to make this an age thing, but I think this is kind of one of those, it's definitely generational. When you started this, I was like, I am going to guess that everybody that you were talking with is like right around our age and has the same sentiment. But it's their bosses, their managers that are, 5, 10, 20 years older than them that operate that way. And I think the thing that kind of bothers me about all of it is you can do that and you can be fine with it so long as you don't have the same expectation for everybody else on your team. Like, just because it works for you doesn't mean that it works for everyone else or that it should be expected from everyone else.
I really like those
also too, you don't have to be a martyr. Like that's
yeah.
You don't have to
you don't get an award either
for anyone. Correct.
Right. Yeah. I really like those email sign-offs that people have like included in every single signature that they send an email. Like, these are, if you receive this email at an odd time, like, these are my working hours. I don't expect you to respond. Please like abide by your own working hours. And I really like that. I think it's a little corny, but it's also like a nice reminder. Like, I don't know, if you get an email from your boss late at night, like, I can literally wait a couple hours until the next day. So just an interesting concept that we were talking about and discussing. So that was interesting. My other funny, interesting story I thought of is this project I am working on, unfortunately, works with a lot of lawyers. And I find that so funny considering I was like in 4th grade, I want to be a lawyer when I grow up. And here I am working with them, despising it.
Yeah.
They just like, I made friends with this one girl and I'm like clinging to her, being like, any questions, I'll go ask her. And she's so lovely. But anything that falls outside of that, I have to go find someone else. And I just had a really not wonderful, I was like literally reading some of our Slack messages to Sarah earlier, laughing, of this person that I had to interact with on the legal team. And it was just like so silly. And I don't know. I think I would say previous to that, like working with engineers would be like my least favorite group to work with. No, the lawyers have absolutely blown that out of the water for me. So lawyers, you're on my shit list, is what I'm saying. I'm so not enjoying it.
Don't challenge it. No, that's so funny. I think being exposed to working with different, I don't know, job titles, you start to pick up on characteristics that a lot of these people tend to have. And I feel like if anybody relates to engineers or developers, it's definitely lawyers. So I guess kudos to them for what they do and kudos to us for what we do. But that's the joy of project management. It's just truly getting a taste of everything.
Yes. So ripped that Band-Aid off and I'm learning how to interact with those groups. So you can say I learned something new at work this week, which is, I guess, a good thing. Next week, it's July. Sarah,
Yeah, wild, right?
Whoa. You kind of saw, did you see the wheels turning in my brain as I said that out loud? That's crazy. Wow. Well, I hope everyone has fabulous 4th of July plans and has a wonderful, safe time.
Yeah.
Please,
Safe.
you see all these crazy things with fireworks. So everyone, please be smart and use your brains.
Yeah, our listeners are smart. You're smart. Be smart.
So smart. You is smart. You is kind. You is important.
Literally, Ellen told me that today.
I did. I felt like you needed a little oomph. And so that was the quote that spoke to me at the time. So I hope you enjoyed it.
I did, always. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I am so excited to share Spark Mamas. I was telling you about it. Just with people our age, I feel like it's super important to talk about these kinds of things. So I'm super excited to share today's episode. It was a fun one.
Absolutely. They're just Amber and Chelsea are so wonderful. And like selfishly, I got a lot out of the episode or out of the interview as well.
Agreed.
And I'm hoping it translates to the listeners because I'm really, really excited about this one. So make sure you give them a follow and check them out. We'll link all the places that you can find them. So enjoy their episode and let us know what you think. Hi, everybody. We're going to go ahead and jump into an interview with Amber and Chelsea. Amber is a mother and licensed marriage and family therapist with a specialty in women's reproductive mental health and early childhood. She currently operates a private practice, co-directs the UCSD Women's Reproductive Mental Health Program, and co-founded Spark Mamas. Chelsea is a mother who operates a private practice as a licensed marriage and family therapist with a specialty in women's reproductive mental health and early attachment. She also co-founded Spark Mamas and is a certified fair play facilitator. Welcome, Amber and Chelsea, to the podcast. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you for having us. To be here.
Okay. Quick little background on how this interview came to be. And when we did the interview with Natalie, she immediately reached out to me and said, "Hey, I have someone that you need to meet." And she put me in connection with Amber first. And then we kind of had this conversation and said, "Yes, absolutely. We need to have both of you on the podcast." And I love the mission behind Spark Mamas. And I think that this is going to be a great conversation about being a woman in the workplace and navigating what that's like, having a business, but also working full time, and not only doing that, but also you're helping other women in your day to day, which I think is incredible. So that's my quick little intro on how this interview came to be. But this is also our first interview with 2 other guests, so it's a first time for us, which is exciting. So that's enough blabbing from me. I want to know, Amber or Chelsea, feel free to whoever wants to go first, but I want to know what you guys wanted to be when you grew up.
I'll jump in. I knew I always wanted to be a mother or a hairstylist. There was a lot of family debate about neither of those would earn me a really good salary, but I always was like, that's okay. Money can't buy you love.
Love that.
I didn't have like a clear sort of job description as much as like an idea of what I wanted to do in terms of like working with families or helping kids or just something kind of connected to sort of a helping profession. And I just didn't have a clear sense of what that was going to be until I got older.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, it sounds like you both stuck with what you thought you wanted to be at a young age. Besides the hairstylist, I'm assuming.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. I love that. So we figured because there's so much to cover in this episode, we want to hear a quick, I don't even want to say elevator pitch because you're not pitching. We just want to hear the conversation around like what your career looked like, how, it landed to where you're at today. And we can take it back as early as like college and then just kind of like early career into where you're at. So Amber, I'm going to start with you. Let's hear your career journey.
My career journey. I actually started off in undergrad in psychology and nonprofit management. Those are my 2 degrees in undergrad, and knew I wanted to work in nonprofits in some capacity. So spent a lot of time just kind of trying to sort out what that looked like, volunteering in different places when I was in college, trying to kind of find the right fit of what I was looking to do with that degree. Once I graduated, I'd had some guidance along the way with some other people who had entered into the field of marriage and family therapy. And so felt like that was sort of what I wanted to do at that point. So applied to graduate schools in marriage and family therapy, And in the process of getting my degree, have worked in various different settings, trying to kind of fine tune the area in which I wanted to work. So I started off working in settings, working with kids. I'm trained as an early childhood therapist, and doing a lot of work with children and families, but the child being the identified patient, and really finding in that process that I was really missing the conversations with the parents, and finding that like the earliest point of intervention needed to be sort of there versus with the kids as much, and felt like that was more impactful for me. I felt like I was getting frustrated to some extent working in the sense of like not making the kind of progress or outcomes I wanted to see. So made my switch over to maternal mental health, and an opportunity presented itself for me to start the clinic at UCSD. And so I started there in 2006, and started the program there with one of the OBGYNs, and have kind of evolved from there in terms of that piece of it.
Whoa. Wow. I bet that's so rewarding too. Like, I don't know. I work in a corporate job and I'm like, just sometimes feel like I'm typing away. And I often get jealous of people that really have like such a mission and of like value in what they do and bring to their work. So I really, really admire that.
My evolution was not linear. It was actually really cool to hear Amber talk about hers, and just because there were bits and pieces of it that I actually didn't know. But my evolution, I went to high school and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. So I lived abroad. I lived in France for a year as a nanny. Then I came back and I got an A in graphic design, just kind of kicking the can down the road because I knew I had to do something, but I wasn't really sure what that was going to be. So I started working actually for a small journal. And I realized that graphic design was much more of a hobby and a passion than it was a career. So I continued kind of in actually at a junior college, and I ended up getting kind of thinking I wanted to go the route of teaching. I've always worked with kids, whether it was big brother, big sister, nannying, and I ended up getting a degree in cultural studies, which turns out nothing you can really do with that. But I went to UCSD. I loved the learning about, a minor in French. Again, nothing you could really do with that. But I did end up starting to substitute teach. And then at the time I was in therapy. I had, in 2006, I'd lost my father. And so I was seeing a therapist, and I actually went to lunch with my girlfriend who was just graduating from USD's MFT program. And I was like, oh my gosh, I would love to be able to pass the torch. So I applied to graduate school there. I got accepted. And then I met Amber shortly thereafter, actually. She was my supervisor at my practicum. And that was in 2011. So Amber had done a phenomenal job already laying the foundation for the UCSD Women's Reproductive Mental Health Program. And that's kind of where it started.
Wow.
I hate it when Chelsea tells people I was her supervisor. It makes me feel super old.
Like leave out job roles and leave out years. I feel like that's always that's important. Well, thank you for like making that connection, because I was curious like how the two of you, came into each other's lives. Chelsea, I love that you are able to, I feel like the idea of becoming a therapist, like there's always this kind of like moment, right? Whether you saw the positive impacts on someone else or you experience the positive impacts yourself, because I don't know that anybody just one day is like, I'm going to be a therapist. Like it's something where you've had some sort of experience that leads you up to that. So I love that you're able to share that and, make it super relatable. And then Amber, back to you. I'm super curious. This is more of a question. When you talk about working in the university capacity, like what does your day-to-day look like? Is this a program that's meant for students, or is this more like a course or part of the curriculum that you're involved in?
Oh, so I guess to clarify, so I'm at UCSD in the Department of Reproductive Medicine. So the program that we have there is embedded within the OBGYN and the infertility clinics. And so we have a team of therapists that are actually work in the OB clinics. Now we're predominantly telehealth since COVID, but we previously are actually embedded in the clinic. The goal being that we wanted mental health just to be a normal part of women's care versus it being something that's separated out. So if you're coming at earliest point of trying to conceive or you're already pregnant, that our providers are asking about like all parts of you and not just the body parts of your baby or your physical health, but we're asking about your emotional health because there's so much stigma associated with mental health. And so that then we're working collaboratively with their midwives, their physicians, and the other providers at UCSD to help them through that reproductive journey, versus being in an outpatient kind of facility where those things are very separate and distinct, and we can't actually then collaborate as freely as we can within the same system if we're not embedded in the OB clinics. But from a teaching perspective, we're actually a practicum site for the University of San Diego's MFT program. So when therapists are going through the process of becoming therapists and training, we have like an interview process, kind of like a residency program. They can get placed at our site and they do all of their hours with me, and I do the clinical supervision for them to see patients. So we're training them in reproductive mental health. And then when they graduate, a lot of them stay on or they go out into the community. And that's what Chelsea means. Like I met her, like she was doing her practicum placement at UCSD in reproductive medicine. And so I did the training component of it from a therapeutic perspective. And then she stayed on and worked in a capacity with our program for many years after that.
Wow. Okay. I love the whole person perspective, because I think like as Ellen and I are childless and like have conversations about having children, there's always the like concern about your mental health, and it's not typically addressed because, well, first off, the idea of even getting pregnant I feel like is difficult, but then like maintaining your sense of self throughout your pregnancy I think is something that like scares a lot of people. Like it feels like a barrier to entry, right? Like you're physically taking a toll but like mentally taking a toll, and it extends beyond the 9 months or whatever. It starts at this age when you're starting to think about it, but then also too, like once a child is delivered, you don't just like all of a sudden know exactly who you are and what you're supposed to be doing. And like I'm sure if you ask my mom, she probably would still benefit. You just because motherhood changes, like it's very seasonality based. But anyways, I love that, and I wish that this was something that I knew about, but also too like wasn't completely location bound. So we'll have to tap into some resources that extend beyond the San Diego community, because I would love to see what other resources there are. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's the goal for us, to just that's carried through, I think, to our work with Spark Mamas, is just that the focus is actually on identifying what the mom's experience is versus the baby's experience, right? And
definitely
to sort of focus in on those identity losses, because, the majority of women are waiting to have a baby for a lot of really good reasons, and their careers are fully potentially formulated by that point. And so that transition is a lot different than maybe where they didn't go to college or they didn't have a fully fledged career before they decided to make that transition.
Definitely a good point. I am excited to get to like dive into now Spark Mamas. So we know how you two came together, but I'm curious like that early like friendship, relationship, like what that looks like. Hello, little one. They want to join too.
Like, cute baby.
You guys were wondering what the work-life balance looks like. This is it in a nutshell. Baby's crying in the background. Chelsea trying to tune it out and pay attention.
I'm here, I'm present, everything's fine.
I love that. Oh my goodness.
It's funny.
Okay, what was your relationship, your early relationship? We won't explain again why you guys know each other, but what that looked like, and then when you kind of started to identify like, hey, there's a gap, let's fill that need.
Well, since we can't talk about years and when Amber and I met, I will say that one of the beautiful things about working with Amber is that we think differently. Like we're very complementary in how we work together. Which I think, and I'm sure that the two of you can relate to this, like you want to have someone who sees things differently than you. And Amber and I, in our work, at UCSD, we created a parenting series. So we had a mindful motherhood course. We also had probably our most well-attended course, which was at the time called Surviving the First 6 Weeks. And in that, we found that so many, in the work that we do, working with families throughout the pregnancy and the postpartum period, and then even just educating families about what to expect kind of in that 4th trimester, we were finding that people were just ripe with curiosity and also really wanting to know how to get the support that they needed once they left their OBGYN clinic. Because there's this weird period, right, where you deliver your baby and you have that 1 6 or 8 week checkup and you're kind of in no man's land. And we find that really the time to prepare women and their families for that postpartum period is really during pregnancy. And so many people were, starting to seek services when they were, let's say, 5 or 6 months postpartum. And if we would have caught them earlier, either in one of our courses or during therapy during their pregnancies, we had the opportunity to augment some of those shifts in identity that you were talking about, or even just the hormonal fluctuations, or talk about how to make sure that the partnership stays connected during that really stressful time when all the resources all of a sudden get focused on baby. So kind of out of that, Amber and I were always kind of trying to figure out how can we better get resources to families. And out of that is actually really how Spark Mamas grew. So we originally started by just saying we want to have a new mom retreat. We also were talking about having like one hub where we could talk, get updated resources so people knew who we would recommend, right? One of the things too is that most of the birth workers in our community are also mothers. And there are times where they'll show up and also really impassioned to give back to the community. And then there's times when their families need them and they have to leave. So we wanted to have a current list of providers who we knew that were really well educated and sensitive to women's mental health needs during this time. And so we were like, well, let's make an online directory. And then the ideas kind of just kept evolving and evolving. And slowly, it was about 5 years from when we started brainstorming to launch, working together on Sunday mornings, was really when Spark Mamas kind of turned into what it is now, which is essentially an online registry. So moms can identify what they need to support their mental health in their physical health in that postpartum period. They can add it to their registry so their friends and families can shop for them. And with every gift that's purchased, we actually get to give back a portion of our proceeds to a nonprofit community that's in the business of caring for women.
Wow, that is incredible. Was there maybe like from a business lens leading up to the launch, what was that like? What was that official like countdown, 3, 2, 1, poof, you're live? What was that like? Also while working full-time jobs?
Busy. And
Immediately.
and terrifying, right? Because you don't know what to expect. And Chelsea and I didn't know, like, was this going to just be super like wah, wah, or was this going to be like, oh my gosh, and then we're super busy, right? And we're busier than ever. And so it's hard to know and how to plan for that appropriately when you are wearing so many hats, because you don't know how much time you're going to need, right? So I think that piece is still very ever present for us in a lot of different ways. But I think part of it too was just like Chelsea and I, in our own way, we can be perfectionistic about different things. And it always felt like, are we sure we're ready? Are we sure we're ready? And it's just this thing where you just have to just like let go of that and just go and let it be imperfect in its own way. And so I think that was a hard kind of thing for us to just finally like let it go. I joke that it was like the longest birth of my life. And like, just let it go. We're going to figure it out once it's here, So at least for me, that was my kind of experience with that piece of it.
Oh my gosh. And I think it's important. We identified this at the beginning, and when you launched, and Ellen hinted at that in her question, Amber and Chelsea have full-time jobs in addition to this. Before we jump into like a little bit more about like Spark Mamas and your experience with that, I want to know about after you launched, everything's live. How did you manage to find balance? And also granted to say before launching, it's not like the work didn't exist.
Right.
But I'm just curious, like once everything was live, how did you kind of initially create balance? And if you didn't find balance, like what are ways that you're trying to, I guess, create more in your life? How many times can I say the word balance? Holy cow.
Well, I actually think it goes to show the fact that it's really hard, right? So during that time, not only we also taking care of our patients whose needs are constantly in flux. I was going through infertility treatments, right? So we had our launch party in April, and then I did an embryo transfer with IVF. I think actually right after we did May Mother's Day event. And then the next day I did an embryo transfer. So trying to hold all of those pieces, right? Amber's got 2 kids who are very active. And then we both have, our patients and our commitment to them. And so part of that was like, Amber and I took 5 years to launch, right? And part of that was because we had to start and stop, because for us, our mental health and the needs of our family are always going to be first. The needs of our patients are always going to be second. And then Spark Mamas is going to, we very much launched like 1.0 version of it. What we really wanted to launch is like this version of like the 5.0 that we just kind of keep talking about. And we know it will come, but it can't come at the cost of either of us or either our families. And then, of course, our ability to care for our patients.
That's
so
that quote,
I don't know what balance. I don't know how that answers your question.
Yeah.
I just
no,
it's
a
something
trick
that we
question,
have
honestly.
to. Thank you.
It is.
I think to like sort of the important piece for us always is that we have to check in all the time about that balance, right? And I don't think it's I don't think you like, okay, here's the formula for balance and then I've achieved it. I think it's like, where am I at today? Where am I at this week? Where are we at this month? What do we see we need to do? What do we have to prioritize? And for me, that is a constant process of trying to figure out what I necessarily need to do and what I ideally want to do, and then where I'm at with my bandwidth and where I'm going to land with that all the time.
Definitely.
Totally. It's that I love the quote, but I also hate the quote of you can have it all, but you can't have it all right now. Right. And it sounds like both of you are very much in sync of, you said your priority level, your friends and family, your patients, and then Spark Mamas. So where your priorities are and where you can allocate that time and that balance. And it's probably different every single day. But again, you're constantly working towards trying to achieve that balance of some kind. And I wish I had the secret sauce and secret recipe, but I appreciate the vulnerability of that part of the conversation, right? I mean, it is different every single day, and you're going to drop things as you go, and which kind of leads me into a question of, with everything that you guys have going on, with the order of priorities that you have, has there been a time where something has had to take a back seat, or you've had to shift your priorities around? If so, what was that experience like, and maybe a learning lesson from it?
Yeah, I'll actually start with this one. I was working with Amber at UCSD. I also had a private practice that I started in 2016. And during kind of, I guess it was 2018, kind of, I had a lot of personal life stuff come up, including losses, including my own, I'm a type 1 diabetic. So I had kind of some health stuff come up. And it was really tough, but Amber and I spoke at large about whether or not I could continue to work in UCSD, right? Because it really had to depend, where did I feel good? Where did I feel the healthiest? Where did I feel the happiest? And so in March of 2019, I left UCSD, and that was a really hard decision, one that took me years to come to. Because I loved working with Amber. I loved working with the team, and I really loved the mission of being able to destigmatize mental health and just kind of have it be a normal part of care, just because we know that women are more vulnerable to mental health, stressors and mental health diagnoses during their reproductive transition. And that was really important to me, but it couldn't come at my own cost, of my own health and my own well-being. And so in March of 2019, I left UCSD. And that was also, good, bad, or otherwise, really forced me to stay really connected to the team at UCSD, because being in private practice, it can be often very lonely. And so that need for collaboration amongst providers is good for patient care. And it's also really, really important for my mental health and for my ability to provide good patient care, is to be able to connect with other therapists. And so even though I was really nervous about losing that, it actually allowed me to have more of that in my life, because I made sure to actively seek it out, to call Amber and say, hey, can I talk to you about a tough case? Or to call up a psychiatrist and get another, patient perspective. And so even though it was risky, it actually ended up being totally fine, because the thing I was most worried about losing, I actually recognized I needed to kind of create it for myself in a different way.
I think that's important. We've had a lot of women on the podcast that work in careers where it's very focused on other people's energy, and physical therapists, nurses. And I always ask, like, how are you able to like maintain a sense of peace where like you can protect your energy, because it's like you can't show up for your patients, half-hearted, and especially in the mental health field where you're listening to hours of people share their stories. Like, how do you kind of safeguard that? So thank you for sharing that. Amber, I want to turn the question to you. Has there been an experience in your career where you were like, okay, this is it, something has to change? And what were some learning lessons from that pivot?
Yeah, I feel like for me, I used to work a lot with kids before. And in particular, I worked in foster care and adoption and really, really, really tough abuse, child abuse situations with family systems. And that work is so rewarding. And the flip side of that is like when you transition into your own life of becoming a mother, that work is really, really, really hard to do. And it's really close to home in a lot of ways. And you have to step back and see whether or not that's good for your own mental health and whether or not you can show up in the same way that those families deserve. And so me pulling back from doing that kind of work was like a pretty formative shift because up until that point, I really was very immersed in that community and that world in a lot of ways. So I think pulling back from that was one of the more formative shifts for me. I think, Chelsea and I have talked about this a lot in terms of just our work together as friends and as therapists. Our livelihood, which is maybe potentially different for other people, is very much contingent upon our mental health. And depending upon if there are seasons of life that we go through, either in our personal lives or with our family systems or any of those pieces, there's this constant process of going, okay, that was too much. I need to pull back over here. And for me, that might look like not seeing as many patients that week or setting a boundary in my private practice, or like Chelsea and I are very open about communicating with each other, like, dude, I'm not in a good space. I need you to take up more this week and vice versa. Right. And so that component of it, I think, is really like, it's kind of a trifold aspect in a way around boundary setting, around knowing your own season of life that you're in. I mean, I was very intentional about waiting until my kids were a little older before I could give more space to something like Spark Mamas, because trying to do that when my kids were younger, I don't think I would have been able to do that, quite honestly. Like, you have to have that counterbalance, and also doing it alone. There's no way I could do Spark Mamas without Chelsea. Like, it's just not, it wouldn't be possible. So.
Amber, I resonate with what you say. I did not have nearly the same experience as you, but my degree from college was in early childhood education. I always loved working with kids. And my first job out of school, I was a nanny full time. And that was a learning experience, I will say, and was only there for a couple of months before we parted ways. I went into teaching and then I went back into nannying and found this wonderful family. And I was, I think, like 24, 25. I mean, I had only been, in the working world for a couple of years, but I had the experience where I was like, whoa, I am not enjoying this so much so to where it's affecting me and my thoughts about, like, do I want to have a family one day? And it made me really, really look at what I'm doing and, like, is this job worth me making future decisions about my family? Is it worth it? No. And thankfully I was able to look inward and say, like, this is not the right move for me. And I made a transition. But as I'm learning more and meeting with you, and I mentioned Natalie earlier, and another one of the women we interviewed, her name is Amelia, and she's a pelvic floor health physical therapist, and learning about all of these different ways to support women and families is so interesting to me, because I just had such a blinder view of teaching and nanny, right? Like, that was my experience, and those were kind of the only avenues I thought that could be helpful and supportive to family.
I think that the thing that actually is probably for me most innovative in the sense is that we're starting to recognize that there isn't actually a one thing that fits for every mother. And I think that's part of the goal for us with Spark Mamas, is to say, here are all of these different things that you're going to potentially need, different providers at different points. And you're probably going to give yourself permission or need those at any given point, and they're different. Someone might need Natalie as a sleep consultant at 6 months versus 2 weeks, and or may not need it at all because they have some sort of unicorn sleeper, right? Like, there's different variables that I think go into that. And I think actually the innovative thing is making space that, like, we can't assume that we know what mothers are going to need. And that there's going to be this one thing that actually works, and giving them the access to that care. I mean, certainly, I've been at UCSD since 2006. I can tell you, like, for sure, I feel like one of the most formative changes is actually people talking about mental health. So it's not an actual, like, innovative thing. We've all been doing it for a long time, but there's a lot more awareness, there's a lot more education, and then there's a lot less stigma around even just making space that that's a normal part of what's going to happen in that transition. So for me, that's a huge shift in our industry.
I want to get into more about Spark Mamas and like the mission behind what you guys do, and kind of here we talked about elevator pitch earlier. Insert elevator pitch here.
Well, one of the things that we find is everybody wants to take care of the baby, but really taking care of mom is taking care of baby. So when, kind of piggybacking on Amber's answer, this idea that there isn't a one size fits all, and that mothers deserve to be cared for, not just during pregnancy, but actually most importantly during that postpartum period, right? So I think that sometimes we think about caring for mom just while she's at the hospital, and recognizing that caring for mom isn't just the physical caring for mom, like a referral to PT, it's also the emotional caring for mom, right? And as a new mom, I can say that being able to go to acupuncture now isn't just about me getting acupuncture treatment. It's also me saying, what do I need in order to get out of the house, right? I need to have a way to feed my baby while I'm gone. I need to find somebody who's going to watch my child for that hour appointment. I also am going to have to say, what do I get being gone for an hour? It isn't just an acupuncture appointment anymore. It's also time for myself and time to connect to who I was before I'm Jude's mom, right? And so we know that these gifts are not just about the actual treatment and caring for the physical aspect of mom, whether it's a manicure, whether it's a meal delivery service. It's also about identifying that moms need to be cared for and talked about and nourished just as much as babies do during this time. And so that's a huge part of our mission. And it's just also identifying, we have 5 different categories. So we have the gifts of time, things that give time back to the mother, gifts of connection, ways that mom can either connect to herself, connect to her baby, and or connect to her partner. We also have gifts of wellness, right? So physical wellness, whether it's pelvic floor therapy, whether it's actually working with somebody to help you understand like why your body's out of alignment and how to kind of stitch yourself back together. We have gifts of beauty, right? Because I think one of the things that we all know is that women's physical changes can often make her feel like she's looking at someone who she doesn't relate to anymore. And so sometimes getting a manicure or getting your hair done can actually revive you in a way that sometimes can be better than a therapy appointment, like it's just a way to connect back to who you are. And the gifts of support, right? Things that we know to actually support a mom. For example, like Natalie, how can she support you, or a breastfeeding consultant support you as you learn your new role, right? There are very few jobs where you have no on-the-job training. And I think motherhood is a huge one. And you're kind of like, well, it's supposed to be intuitive and instinctual. And for a lot of people, it's not, whether they've never been around a baby before, whether they maybe didn't want to become a mother, or baby's temperament we can never control for. So really in identifying the categories, we want to, tell mom that it's okay to take care of herself in all different ways. It's not just a pelvic floor because you're having continence and you're peeing on yourself. You also deserve equally to feel beautiful.
Yeah, I was going to say too, Chelsea, I think like one of the things that was important that we identified with the way that our model, that we modeled Spark Mamas, has a lot to do with the barriers that we find in these resources. Have always been there, but why aren't women accessing them, right? And one of those reasons has a lot to do with, for example, mothers are much more willing to spend money on a baby than they are themselves. So the goal of putting it into a registry is to say, I can ask for this as a gift, and that someone can buy it for me, and if we already have the funding for it, then I'm going to be more likely to use it versus going out and spending that money on this thing for myself, because it's just harder for women to do that. And they feel guilty, like they shouldn't spend the money on themselves. And so we wanted to sort of reduce that barrier by putting it into this registry where they're asking for that upfront and people are contributing to that. The other barrier that we find is that lots of people want to help, but they don't know how to help, and they don't know how to help in the way that mothers actually need. So they're like, oh, what do you need? The moms are like, I don't know, and, oh, I'm here if you want and I can help you, but they're not actually doing anything that's tangible, right? And so the mom then feels bad about asking for it. We want to have this thing where it also helps the people who are helping moms, because they can go on and go, oh, you know what? You could actually, I'm just going to buy this gift for you and send it to you as a meal delivery service. So you don't have to worry about dinner for that night. And I don't have to think about it, right? And I'm going to get this for you because you deserve to go have a massage. And so it helps the people helping moms in a way that feels more practical And it gives them a way to reduce that barrier of just being like, I'm here if you need me, and ask for help. Moms are not going to call and ask them for help because they don't even know what to ask for half the time. So that was the other part of it that is really, I think for both of us, a really important piece of it.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is beautiful. And as we start to have more friends that have children, it's like you have this instinct to help, right? Like I think it's very much like a feminine energy is like, okay, I need to help. But it's difficult because it seems like the only way that you're able to give like physical gifts or like time is like a quick phone call or like a gift for the baby. And it is difficult because sometimes you want to like treat you see your friends and they're going through this new phase and they're stepping into this like whole new identity. And like you want to get them a gift card or whatever, but it's like difficult because you're like, what do you want? What do you need? And when you're asked for it, it's like the hardest thing to come up with something. But like if you had a platform where you could go and, kind of in this moment, this is what I need, or like this is the need that I'm anticipating based off of like how I've responded to previous life changes or whatever. And it's just interesting, like the idea of life changes. So often it's like associated with gifts, right? Like a housewarming gift, a wedding shower. And this is like the one experience where it's hyper focused on like a baby who has no idea what they're even getting, right? Like, the baby doesn't know it's in like a beautiful silk outfit. Like, no, get the mom something. So I love this model. I am curious, like, is it specific to San Diego or Southern California, or is the plan to like extend it? Because I'm in Delaware, and not that I'm with child, but just like, sometime.
Yeah, as Chelsea said, this is version 1.0. Our goal is to have Spark Mamas in every community.
Absolutely.
And we designed it with the intention of that, but we also have to have sort of proof of life first and sort of work out the kinks of that and create space for that expansion nationwide. I mean, we do have some providers that are virtual, telehealth and all of that sort of created an opportunity with COVID where some of these gifts that we have, they may be local San Diego providers, but they actually can be purchased and used online in different capacities. So there is some of that's on there already, but we've been really kind of focused in giving back to the San Diego community first. It's easy to I think you can get overwhelmed by the possibility of helping and then where you begin with that. And so really trying to hone that in so that we didn't get overwhelmed either, as we're trying to like kind of with the little amount of time that we have to devote to all of these different avenues, that we can really hone in on all of that and work out all the kinks before we then say, okay, let's launch that further and further and further. Because we want that stability first, right? In terms of that.
Yeah, I love the like local community perspective. My thought is like, my goodness, and I'm sure you have already gotten there, but just like even the amount of influx of like corporate companies that offer maternal benefits. I mean, as like somebody who's looking for jobs, it's like, oh, you don't have maternal benefits? Okay. Like you're not even on the list. But that's the like, oh my God, you're guaranteed 16 weeks of pay, like, or some of them it's like, here's 12 weeks of unpaid. And you're like, good for you. Like, that's not helpful. But like, if you like as a company, I'm like, oh my God, if a company was like, you get so much of a stipend essentially for like postpartum care in, I don't know, whatever, like dollars or gift cards to Spark Mamas, like, oh my God, that would be amazing.
Sarah, we're going to hire you when we get ready to expand to corporations.
Yeah.
We'll be calling you guys. I just heard a job pitch. That's what I heard.
Okay. From coast to coast. Yeah. We're very well connected in the Kansas City, and there are a lot of moms in Kansas City, and a lot of people that listen to this podcast are in Kansas City. Well, okay. See you in a few months.
Actually, it's funny you say that because I was gonna, I think one of the things that Chelsea and I learned along the way with this is that, we're so connected to like our providers who are all women and family owned businesses. It was important to us to keep that as part of the model. And also we had to learn early on that there are just a lot of skills we don't have that we're not that good at. And we'd be like, no, we can do it. Let's figure it out. And then we would like spend so much time doing it. We were like, let's spend $500 and talk to somebody else who knows what they're doing and can do this so much more efficiently. And so
Yeah.
I'm joking about it kind of, but like, yes, that would be like an amazing thing to sort of grow Spark Mamas into. And that's the whole point of it, right? Is that it sparks an idea in your head. Like that's at its core. It just makes me like get goosebumps. Like that's that part of it, right? That you just got excited about that. And then we all got excited about that. That's the whole point, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I just like love that, like when you take care of mothers, like they'll take care of you kind of thing. Like, just we've talked about it in other episodes. I mean, I just like as much of a challenge as it is sometimes, like being a woman, especially to like stepping into this again, we're not mothers, but like watching our friends become mothers and like just step into this like total zone of equal parts vulnerability, but just like badassery. I'm like, oh my God, I knew you were amazing. But then like you're a mom and you're even more amazing. Like I didn't even know that you had this in you and you are just crushing it. And so it's just like, I don't know. I love this. I could ramble for hours.
We get very passionate about it. Moms in the job market, they're so efficient, right? Like they're just like one of the most efficient and like multitasking people on the planet. Like they're just tremendous in that way.
So Sarah and I, she was in town recently, and it was the group of girls sitting talking about we all want to be moms one day, and what the hell is that going to be like? And if we could close our eyes and plan everything perfectly, here's how we would want it to go. And so those are the kinds of conversations as like background that we're having, right? And one thing that is like a central focus of our conversations is women having to sacrifice at some point their career to have a family. And I think that personally, that's something that I think about a lot. And I kind of struggle with a lot, to be honest. Any pieces of advice for myself or anyone else that's in that state of mind or thinking that way?
Like I'm going to let Chelsea take this one because she's in the midst of being on maternity leave.
I'm like, help me, help.
Well, it's interesting because I work with when I was at UCSD and actually my private practice, I work with a lot of people whose journeys to become mothers has been really complicated by fertility struggles. So I dropped my earbud, or other things where it just didn't go as expected, right? And I think one of the things that it's taught them very early on is to like stress is huge, right? Stress it's something we can't quantify. But it plays a huge role in their ability to conceive, potentially. It plays a huge role in how they go through the journey. And I think that same thing is true even if you spontaneously conceive, right? So I think one of the pieces of advice that I always, and it looks different for everybody, but I know it's like, how do you identify what's most important to you? And make sure you protect that and safeguard that. And oftentimes it comes with asking for a lot of help, which again is super vulnerable, right? Because I think there's this idea that you want to be the superwoman. You want to be the woman who's like a badass, mom who's also killing it in her career. And it's okay. Kind of like as you started, you can have it all. You just can't have it all at the same time. And so sometimes it means, giving yourself permission, like, as much as I maybe wanted to exclusively breastfeed my baby, that might be harder at work. And so holding on to that while also grieving, the loss of maybe not having the time. How do I either ask for help in order to continue to breastfeed at work? How do I look at my, what I had hoped for and where I'm at now, and I didn't be flexible and kind of in changing that? How do I also maybe ask my partner for more help so I can have a gradual return to work so I can continue to breastfeed in that capacity that maybe I'd hoped for. So I don't think it's ever one thing, right? Like, but I think it's constantly looking at how can I be flexible and how can I also trust that, I expected my birth and my postpartum period to look very different. And it's looked different in ways that are far exceeded my expectations, in ways that I've had to kind of grieve parts of that along the way. And so I think also being okay with, shifting your expectations, because once you become a mom, maybe work isn't going to be as important to you as it once was.
Yeah.
Right. And so when I think about you, Ellen, kind of like forecasting the future, also knowing that you're not going to know what yourself in 2 years is going to want.
Totally. Totally. Thank you for sharing that. And if there's one thing about me, I struggle asking for help. So might need to start working on that from what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it goes back to that, like that it takes a village, right?
Yeah.
And your friends and your family want to help you. But
Yeah.
again, sometimes it's giving yourself that peace of mind to say, like, what is it that I need? And you actually might have to be quiet with that, like, and just really sit with that. Sometimes it takes talking to a therapist to help you kind of pull out what are some of the areas where I could get support. Talking to your partner.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, Chelsea, as you were finishing that thought, perfect. So I'll come to the two of you for my therapy needs, and then I'll send all my friends and family to Spark Mamas to go buy me stuff.
Perfect.
Problem solved.
See, you got a plan.
Yeah, I was going to say too, I know we're getting close to time too, but I was going to say with Chelsea, I think part of it is like with the work, we have those conversations a lot with moms and just making space that's a normal thing in therapy for them to have conversations about that transition. And I think a lot of families do try to forecast what they think they're going to feel like and what that transition back to work is going to look like. And I don't think that they can predict that. And so giving themselves permission to let go of a story around that, they might find that when they get ready to transition back to work, that it gave them permission to leave a job that they never liked in the first place, or maybe they have a different kind of passion for something different than maybe they previously had. And I think the other part of it is like having a really, really, really good conversation with your partner around division of labor, right? And what is that going to look like? Because that's one of the barriers to a lot of mothers being able to actually balance the workload between a paid job and being at home with their children, is being able to have a partner who can take up all that invisible load so they can actually do a paid job and maintain their careers with a supportive environment at home, picking up some of those pieces. And that piece is a huge barrier to women not returning to work, I think, and or like having to let go of something.
Totally. Amazing pieces of advice.
Yeah. And I have to say, like, learning about the idea of like the invisible load, the mental load, like that's not something that existed when, you know, like we were growing up. I would say that that's very recent, at least to me. And like even without kids, it's important to like start that early, as far as like communication. There's so much I could also say too about like, we talk a lot about, I mean, there's interviewees that we have that work in the corporate world, and there's a lot of frustrations and things that they have, and it's kind of just like the only answer is like it's just the system, like it's just the system. And like I think unfortunately like modern day society isn't, at least in the US, like built unfortunately to support mothers. And I think it's important to note that, because like a lot of these struggles don't not that they don't exist elsewhere, they're just not as prevalent. And like I always feel this, especially when I think about like trying to like think about having kids, and it's like you have those immediate stressors, and it's like people and women in other countries don't have the same stressors. They have different stressors, but I think sometimes it's important to like recognize that like it's just not built to support me. So how can I best support myself with what I have? And we could talk about that for a whole other 45 minutes. But
but I think therapeutically it is actually really important, because I think a lot of moms feel like they're failing because they can't do it. And if you pull back and you say systemically, this is a much bigger problem than you, it's not you were set up to fail. That feels really empowering in a lot of ways, because then you have different expectations of what that balance looks like, because it's a systemic problem for sure.
Right.
Yeah, there was a book that I read about Finland, and I was like, I like the sun too much, but like as far as being a mother, maybe I can move there.
Yep.
Bye, family. No. I want to take it back to you, Amber and Chelsea. This is a big question. How do you personally define success for yourself?
Well, I'll just say that I know that my success has looked different over the course of my years, you know, my 20s, my 30s, and now into my 40s. I think for me, finding balance is really important. That feels like success, because it is, you know, the struggle of the juggle, and trying to figure out for me when I'm kind of in flow, and when I'm tending to the things that bring me joy, when I'm able to play, when I'm able to connect with my partner and my friends and travel, that feels really successful, because I know I'm it's a good day or a good week or a good season. So for me, success looks like constantly like consuming knowledge and pushing myself, right? Like one of the cool things about Spark Mamas is get to take some of my like graphic design stuff and apply it to thinking about Spark Mamas, right? So it's being able to touch on different things that inspire me and keep me curious, but also keep me grounded and connected to the things that are most important.
Snaps because your website is gorgeous.
It is. It's so cute.
I did not do it. I did not do that. My girlfriend did.
Well, tell your girlfriend that she's amazing, but I'm sure your creative direction. Yes.
She's amazing. She's an attorney turned graphic designer. Her name's Marissa Wilson, and she's phenomenal.
Amazing. And our branding was done by another woman and a mother, and she helped drive that vision for us in like a way that like the two of us were like, whoa, that was it. That's cool. That's what we were looking for. You know,
totally.
I guess I was pausing about your question because I think, you know, I feel like I've had a transformation around thinking about the term and even just the word success. I grew up in a very performance-based family system. I'm one of 12 kids. All of them were like Division I athletes, myself included. And so I come from a very performance-based environment. And I think I learned pretty early on, like there's a lot of really negative, unhealthy kind of aspects of that. So I feel like I've spent the most of my adult life trying to actually get away from performance-based definitions of success. So I think for me, like the word that comes to mind is like just feeling content. Does my family system feel content? Do I feel content? Does my relationship feel content? Am I content at work? Because I don't think there's this like, I think you're in a good enough space if that's like for me is like kind of the success component of it, because I think you're going to have highs and lows at work all the time and highs and lows in your family system. But does it feel like it's content pretty much all around in everybody's physical health and mental health, and you have good relationships that are rewarding and reciprocal? Those pieces all feel way more successful to me and easier to sort of navigate than whether I'm climbing up something or not all the time from a performance-based perspective.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both for sharing your answers and versions of success. It's, again, one of my favorite questions to ask our guests. We're going to go into some rapid fire questions. And I think for the purpose of our two guests, we'll alternate questions between the two of you, if that's okay. So my first one, I'm going to go to you, Chelsea. What is one thing you cannot live without during the workday?
Probably coffee. Or another therapist to talk to when I've had a really crazy session.
Another sounding board.
Love it. Amber, what's your favorite way to unwind after work?
Reading or alone time.
Ooh, okay. Chelsea, what is the biggest benefit that you've ever had from a job before?
Health insurance.
Important. And practical.
Very, very. And Amber, I'll ask the same question to you. What's one of the best benefits that you've ever had?
Also health insurance. Health insurance and, you know, just the ability to have time to take vacations and things like that for my health and my wellness.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Amber and Chelsea, it has been such a pleasure to have both of you on. Thank you so much for sharing your career evolutions and advice and everything in between. We so enjoyed having both of you. So thank you.
Thank you for having this great conversation.
Likewise.
Amazing. Yeah. We will be sure to include all the places that you can find both Amber and Chelsea separately, as well as their gorgeous website for Spark Mamas as well. We'll have all those places, all of the places where you can find them included in the show notes. Thank you everybody for listening. Hope you enjoyed this episode. And remember, at the end of the day, it's just a job. Thanks everybody.